she proceeded to address Ellen Burns. "How are you tonight, Helen? Have you coughed much today?" "Not quite so much, I think, ma'am." "And the pain in your chest?" "It is a little better." Miss Temple got up, took her hand and examined her pulse. Then she returned to her own seat. As she resumed it, I heard her sigh low. She was pensive a few minutes. Then, rousing herself, she said cheerfully, "But you are my visitor tonight. I must treat you as such." She rang a bell. "Barbara," she said to the servants who answered it, "I have not yet had tea. Bring the tray, and place cups for these two young ladies." And the tray was soon brought. How pretty to my eyes did the china and bright teapot look, placed on the little round table near the fire. How fragrant was the steam of the beverage, and the scent of the toast, of which, however, I, to my dismay, for I was beginning to be hungry, discerned only a very small portion. Miss Temple discerned it too. "Barbara," said she, "can you not bring a little more bread and butter? There is not enough for 3." Barbara went out. She returned soon. "Madam, Mrs. Harden says she has sent up the usual quantity." Mrs. Harden, be it observed, was the housekeeper, a woman after Mr. Brocklehurst's own heart, made up of equal parts of whalebone and iron. "Oh, very well," returned Miss Temple. "We must make it do, Barbara, I suppose." And as the girl withdrew, she added, smiling, "Fortunately, I have it in my power to supply deficiencies for this once." Having invited Helen and me to approach the table, and placed before each of us a cup of tea with one delicious but thin morsel of toast, she got up, unlocked a drawer, and taking from it a parcel wrapped in paper, disclosed presently to her eyes a good-sized seed cake. "I meant to give each of you some of this to take with you," said she, "but as there is so little toast, you must have it now." And she proceeded to cut slices with a generous hand. We feasted that evening as on nectar and ambrosia, and not the least delight of the entertainment was the smile of gratification with which our hostess regarded us, as we satisfied our famished appetites on the delicate fare she liberally supplied. Tea over and the tray removed, she again summoned us to the fire. We sat one on each side of her, and now a conversation followed between her and Ellen, which it was indeed a privilege to be admitted to hear. Miss Temple had always something of serenity in her hair, of state in her mien, of refined propriety in her language, which precluded deviation into the hardened, the excited, the eager, something which chastened the pleasure of those who looked on her and listened to her, by a controlling sense of awe, and such was my feeling now. But as to Ellen Burns, I was struck with wonder. The refreshing meal, the brilliant fire, the presence and kindness of her beloved instructress, or perhaps, more than all of this, something in her own unique mind, had roused her powers within her. They woke, they kindled. First, they glowed in the bright tint of her cheeks, which till this hour I had never seen but pale and bloodless. Then they shone into the liquid lustre of her eyes, which had suddenly acquired a beauty more singular than that of Miss Temple's, a beauty neither of fine colour, nor long eyelash, nor penciled brow, but of meaning, of movement, of radiance. Then her soul sat on her lips, and language flowed, from what source I cannot tell. As a girl of 14, a heart large enough, vigorous enough, to hold the swelling spring of pure, full, fervid eloquence? Such was the characteristic of Helen's discourse on that, to me, memorable evening. Her spirit seemed hastening to live within a very brief span, as much as many live during a protracted existence. They conversed of things I have never heard of nations and time past, of countries far away, of secrets of nature they discovered or guessed at, They spoke of books, how many they had read, what stores of knowledge they possessed. Then they seemed so familiar with French names and French authors. But my amazement reached its climax when Miss Temple asked Ellen if she sometimes snatched at a moment to recall the Latin her father had taught her, and taking a book from a shelf, bade her read and construe a page of Virgil. And Helen obeyed, my organ of veneration expanding at every sounding line. She had scarcely finished ere the bell announced bedtime. No delay could be admitted. Miss Temple embraced us both, saying, as she drew us to her heart, "God bless you, my children." Helen, she held a little longer than me. She let her go more reluctantly. It was Helen her eye followed to the door. It was for her she a second time breathed a sad sigh. For her she wiped a tear from her cheek. On reaching their bedroom, we heard the voice of Miss Scatcherd. She was examining drawers. She had just pulled out Ellen Burns, and when we entered, Helen was greeted with a sharp reprimand, and told that tomorrow she should have half a dozen of untidily folded articles pinned to her shoulder. "My things were indeed in a shameful disorder," murmured Helen to me in a low voice. "I intended to have arranged them, but I forgot." Next morning, Miss Scatcherd wrote in conspicuous characters on a piece of pasteboard the word slattern, and bound it like a phylactery round Helen's large, mild, intelligent, and benign-looking forehead. She wore it till evening, patient and resentful, regarding it as a deserved punishment. The moment Miss Scatcherd withdrew after afternoon school, I ran to Helen, tore it off, and thrust it into the fire. The fury of which she was incapable had been burning in my soul all day, and tears, hot and large, had continually been scalding my cheek, for the spectacle of her sad resignation gave me an intolerable pain at the heart. About a week subsequently the incidents above narrated, Miss Temple, who had written to Mr. Lloyd, received his answer. It appeared that what he said went to corroborate my account. Miss Temple, having assembled the old school, announced that inquiry had been made into the charges alleged against Jane Eyre, and that she was most happy to be able to pronounce her completely cleared from every imputation. The teachers then shook hands with me and kissed me, and a murmur of pleasure ran through the ranks of my companions. Thus relieved of a grievous load, I from that hour set to work afresh, resolved to pioneer my way through every difficulty. I toiled hard, and my success was proportionate to my efforts. My memory, not naturally tenacious, improved with practice. Exercise sharpened my wits. In a few weeks, I was promoted to a higher class. In less than 2 months, I was allowed to commence French and drawing. I learned the first 2 tenses of the verb être, and sketched my first cottage, whose walls, by the by, outrivaled in slope those of the Leaning Tower of Pisa on the same day. That night, on going to bed, I forgot to prepare in imagination the Burmese supper of hot roast potatoes, or white bread and new milk, with which I was wont to amuse my inward cravings. I feasted instead on the spectacle of ideal drawings, which I saw in the dark, all the work of my own hands, freely penciled houses and trees, picturesque rocks and ruins, coop-like groups of cattle, sweet paintings of butterflies hovering over unblown roses, of birds picking up ripe cherries, of wrens' nests enclosing pearl-like eggs, wreathed about with young ivy sprays. I examined too, in thought, the possibility of my ever being able to translate currently a certain little French story book, which Madame Pierrot had that day shown me. Nor was that problem solved to my satisfaction ere I fell sweetly asleep. Well has Solomon said, "Better is a dinner of herbs where love is, than a stalled ox and hatred therewith." I would not now have changed Lowood, with all its privations, for Gateshead and its daily luxuries.